Hello, everyone. I'm back again with next part of the Monster Club send-off. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about the characters in the Monster Club. And before I really get started, I want to preface that I'm not going to go super long into each one. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how I came up with each one, what they meant to me, where I kind of saw them going. My goal here isn't to go into a full-on in-depth character profile. You can just go to DeviantArt and look at the character profiles for that, but I do want to give them the proper love and attention that I feel they deserve. So, without further ado, let's jump right in because there's a lot of characters to get through. So, I think of all characters, we got to start with Sarah. Sarah is, someone's going to correct me, a drider. A dritter. I've heard it said both ways. Someone's going to correct me, I'm sure. But point is, she was the first character that I really created for the Monster Club besides Abraham, and the first monster that Abraham encounters. I loved designing her. I loved not just her looks, but just her attitude. That was what I loved about Sarah, because I sat down and I thought, what kind of monster would be good for this? And I thought, well, what if we had a monster who had no idea how scary she really was? And so Sarah came to me. Now, a couple people have asked, was Sarah inspired by Rhaenyra from the anime Monster Musume? And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I came up with Monster Club before Monster Musume came to mind. I didn't know it was a thing. In fact, I'm not even sure it was a thing when I started Monster Club. So, no, I did not come up with Sarah because of Monster Musume. However, I will admit that when I saw Rhaenyra in Monster Musume, I couldn't help but think, wow, did this dude read about Sarah? And also people have asked me about her eyes, because Sarah went through a bit of a change. When she started, her first image showed her with rather normal red eyes. But then later, after Hannah's redesign, she had 8 eyes, and all of them pupilless and blood red. So people said, what happened? What changed? And honestly, I had asked Mika to draw Sarah with the blood red eyes like that, but she didn't, and I think it was a miscommunication between us, but I never corrected her because, I didn't really care that much. It wasn't that big of a deal. But when Hannah was redesigning, I told Hannah, and she managed to make it happen. People who have worked on art for the Monster Club have often said that Sarah is the hardest to draw just because of her lower spider body, and I don't doubt that a bit, which makes me feel bad for those artists who have committed themselves to her. But I love her to death. Honestly, I love her so much because she's kind of someone I look to in terms of a role model. Sarah is so optimistic. You can't get her down. She just believes in the best in people, especially after dealing with such a heavy and negative background as she has. It's inspiring to see her just come into her own, be positive about people and everything. She was the one who stuck up for Abraham to get him to be part of the club. She stuck up for Annie too to get her to be part of the club. She's so good at seeing the best in people, even when you don't think there is anything good about them. And I admire that. I wish I was more like that. So in many ways, I think Sarah is my favorite character, not just in the Monster Club, but my favorite character that I've ever designed, period, because she emulates kind of what I want to be. An optimistic, hopeful person who brings people together through sheer warmth and love. So, with Sarah out of the way, let's move on to the next one. Next is Asher. Asher is... oh, man, where do I start with Asher? So, when designing the characters, remember, the whole story of Monster Club started with Mika wanting to do a family of vampires. So, I kind of knew a vampire would have to come into it. And so I thought about it for a while, and I thought of Asher. Now, where did the name Asher come from? Really, some people are like, oh, it's such a cool name. You must have really worked hard to come up with it. Actually, no. I watched Blade Trinity, that hokey movie with Ryan Reynolds before he became a super big name star as Deadpool. And I remember one of the vampires being named Asher, and I kind of thought, oh, that's a cool name, so I just went with it. Yeah, totally, that's where it came from. But everything else about Asher I thought was really awesome, and I put so much into him. He is a Christian vampire. He is a vampire who is immune to the cross. And that was something I really wanted to make unique about him. I wanted to make this unique kind of vampire because he was bitten and turned while still wearing his mother's cross, and thus his body reanimated with a natural immunity to it. He's still weak to sunlight and all these other things, but the cross does not hurt him, which turned out to be a twist later. I won't spoil that if you haven't read the story. I urge you to go read the story, but if you're watching this and haven't read the story, what are you doing with yourself? Go read it. Yes, but when it comes to Asher, I think another thing that a lot of people found interesting was I tried to make him as traditionally vampiric as possible. I didn't go the route of Twilight. And I know when you look at Asher, you think, oh, wow, you really, really wanted a Twilight vampire. Actually, to be perfectly honest, that was more Mika's creative license than anything else. The leather jacket, the red shirt, the kind of cool bad boy look. But in reality, the vampire I was thinking of when I was designing Asher was definitely Alucard from Hellsing OVA. His powers, his abilities of shape-shifting, his shadow manipulation, all these overly cool anime-esque things that a vampire could do. I was like, I want Asher to have these abilities. I was really thinking in terms of power. But here's where it got weird with Asher. The more I thought about how powerful I could make him, the more I thought he wouldn't want this power. If there's one thing that I get about Asher, and one thing that I love about Asher, it's that he isn't afraid of his vampiric power, but he doesn't idolize it. That's one thing that I've noticed. A lot of vampires in modern culture today, like in the Twilights and the Blades and the stuff like that, a lot of vampires are like, oh, what I have is a curse, it's terrible, oh, it's so god-awful. And my brother made a great point. We'll point it out. For someone who hates what you are so much, you sure don't seem to show a lot of negatives. You're immortal, you're immune to most weapons, and in some cases, some vampires nowadays are immune to the sun. Kind of like, what's so wrong about being a vampire? What's the big deal? As long as you can feed off animals or find a way to drink blood safely, what's the problem? And the deal with Asher is, it's not that he hates what he is, he just wishes it didn't have to be this way. And he doesn't want to put this curse on anyone else, which gives a very interesting dynamic to Abraham, because Abraham, the main character, wants to feel like he belongs, and he latches on to Asher because he thinks, Asher, you can turn me into a vampire and make me stronger, make me part of the club. But Asher says, no, can't do that. You don't want what I am. I've accepted what I am. I don't want you to have to deal with it. But yeah, Asher was a fun character to create. Definitely love the concept of Ashley. If you don't know what that is, look into it. It was a funny few chapters that I got to write. Very entertaining. Asher's just this really fascinating character. I wish I could have done just a whole series on Asher and him being brought up. Like, I'd love to just do a sort of short, maybe 5-chapter story about Asher before he met the Monster Club. I think that'd be a lot of fun to write. But anyway, that's Asher. I love him. Easily the badass of the group, but the one he's the noble one. He's the noble badass of the group. He recognizes he's the strongest, but he doesn't let that get to his head, because he knows being the strongest doesn't mean you're the best. A couple people actually asked me, why wasn't Asher the leader since he's the strongest? Because, like I just said, Asher knows that strength doesn't make you the best, and he is noble enough and humble enough to recognize that. Next up, I want to talk about Tamil. People have asked me a whole lot about the pronunciation of Tamil's name. Some have said it's Tamil. Some have said it's Tamil. I say Tamil. Again, someone's going to correct me, but he's my character, so I'll call him what I want. Tamil is the mummy, and I've never had a character who annoyed me very quickly like Tamil did. And I'm not saying that because I dislike Tamil. No, far from it. I love Tamil. But it is so hard writing a blind character. I have never written a character who was physically blind before. And that made it very difficult to write Tamil, because there were times I just completely forgot he couldn't see anything. So what I did to counterbalance this was I turned Tamil into a jokester. I made him a joker. Kind of like Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I wanted him to turn his disability into a source of humor. He likes to take punches at himself. He likes to sort of poke fun at his own disability. But these jokes and humorous pranks he plays on himself and others mask an intense loneliness, an intense inability to cope. He feels disconnected from the rest of the world. And actually, one thing that I loved writing was he was asked at one point, if you could see, would you want to? And Tamil replied, no, because it isn't the world he knows. He respects the fact that he's no longer in his time or world, but he doesn't want to see it, because if it's a weird psychological thing. If he actually visually sees this new world he's in, this new time, it further cements the fact that he's out of his time. And I guess a part of him still lives in this limbo of, maybe if I deny it, it's not real. And I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it was just something that was playing in my head while I was writing Tamil. Now, where did Tamil come from? Honestly, he was mostly Mika's invention. Mika really wanted a character who was Middle Eastern or Egyptian in nature, and so we came up with a mummy, and that was kind of her thing. But I love Tamil. He's a great character. I've loved working with him. A couple people have actually asked me, okay, does he have powers too? And I want to go ahead and clarify this. I hate when people do this, and I've noticed it's a common theme. A lot of people, when they read Monster Club, especially early on, like to think that it was a war story. Like, it's the monsters versus the humans, the Dawnbringers versus the monsters. And I didn't want it to be like that. That was never my goal. The only two characters who really fight in Monster Club are Michelle and Asher. The others just kind of do their part. So people always ask, does Tamil have powers like in the Mummy movies? And no, he doesn't. He is just a mummy who is walking. That's all he is. He does not have the ability to summon up plagues or to summon sandstorms or command locusts. No, he can take off his body parts and reattach them. That's about the extent of his power. But again, I play that up for laughs. I play it up for jokes. And that was what Tamil was meant to be. He was meant to be a character who played jokes to mask the intense pain he feels. In fact, after Asher and Michelle get kidnapped by the Dawnbringers, oh, right, spoilers, if you haven't read it, what are you doing here? Go read it. But after Michelle and Asher get kidnapped, we see that he can't do jokes anymore. He can't keep playing jokes. He's been crushed because another part of his world has been taken from him, so the jokes have died. He's fallen into depression. We see the real Tamil come out for a little bit. And I loved writing that. It was hard to write because, again, Tamil can be annoying to write sometimes just because you've got to combine the blindness with the joking habits and the depression. It's a lot mixed together. But, Tamil means a lot to me. He meant a lot to me because I thought, here's a character that I can connect to in a certain sense. Sometimes I feel like I'm out of my time. I sometimes feel like, man, I belonged in the 50s, man. I belonged in the 80s. I'm not meant to be in this time period because I'm too old-fashioned. But at the same time, I have to accept where I'm at, and I accept it by making really bad jokes, being overly goofy, and trying to exist in a world of my own creation, hence all the stories I write. So Tamil, even though he's a jokester who can get on my last nerve writing sometimes, I also feel a kindred connection to him, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I love Tamil. I've loved writing him, even if he could be annoying to write as a blind character, but I really think he was a great addition overall. Not a lot left to say about Tamil other than he was just so much fun. He was it's not easy writing a goofball character. It's not easy writing a comic relief character, but I think I did okay with Tamil. What do you think? Do you think I got him right? I'll trust your judgment. But anyway, that's 3 of the characters. I think this is a good place to pause for now. We'll go on to the next 3 or the rest of them, depending, in the next video. See you then.